Test, test. Hello, friends, and welcome. Welcome to our first ever live stream. Hello, this is Chris. I'm here at the Gristmill Gardens on a Wednesday evening, and I'm really glad to have you here. Thank you so much to all of you that signed up ahead of time. Thank you to those who are just dropping in, and I hope tonight's session is useful for you. Now, we chose to do this on YouTube, specifically for the chat function. So please feel free to engage in discussion in the chat, make comments. If you have any questions about anything that I'm talking about, I would love to get your feedback, your questions, absolutely anything at all that I can help with. So let's dive in. You know, this is absolutely the best time of the year for me, because this is the time of the year when I get to open up my mailbox and I get access to endless numbers of seed catalogs. Over the years, I have signed up for a lot of them. Some of them are so extensive that I even have to pay a pretty penny for them because they're works of art. They're not just useful bits of information. Now, for today's session, tonight's session, we're really just going to be focusing on a couple of the seed catalogs that I've got here. The most important, of course, the most regionally interesting would be West Coast Seeds catalog. This is their this year catalog. I'm very happy to have literally gotten this in the mail today. Thank goodness, finally got it with the postal strike on. But there are lots of other companies. I pulled a few older ones out of my collection just because they're great examples, but I don't have this year's copy yet. So right here we have Heritage Harvest Seed, who is a wonderful folks on the prairies who focus on heritage varieties. Specifically, they've got a pretty funky catalog with lots of information in it. Sometimes, for the grist mill specifically, we want to grow things at a larger scale, at a more commercial scale, and there's a whole variety of companies that provide seeds at that sort of scale. But one of our favorites is Johnny's out of the States. And they also, it's just a wonderful catalog to have because it really goes into a lot of the details that you might be interested if you're growing large volumes. What are the actual yields, and you know, how much do you need to buy per acre and things like that. So that's useful. But nothing beats the prettiest seed catalog. Now, this catalog I literally got in the mail today, and I left it at home before this presentation. So unfortunately, I don't have this year's. I have the 2013 catalog, and this is the expensive one, the one I pay $20 for every year, the giant tome, the whole seed catalog by Baker Creek Seed Company, and this thing is as thick as a phone book. It is a incredibly fun thing to just sit down and read for hours and hours and hours, and so many pretty pictures and all of that. So I love this one. One thing in particular that I really appreciate about this one, let's see if it's in this year. Just looking up Gourds, G-O, let's see here. Aha! One of the coolest things that they've got is they have the fantastic Zucca. And some years they've included some detailed information, including information about us, which is pretty cool to see. So here we are. Let me just switch over and check on the chat. If you have just joined us, please feel free to say hello in the chat. I would love to see where our attendees are coming from this evening. Let us know a little bit about yourself, and if you have any questions over the course of this presentation, feel free to let me know. Now, I've just shown you a handful of different seed catalogs, and the truth is they all serve different purposes, right? Different catalogs are written for different audiences. Something like West Coast Seeds, which is what we're going to focus on mostly today, is perfect for the backyard gardener. There are others that get more technical for more technical growers. There are some, as I said before, that are more for high volume growers that are more on the small commercial sized operation or the medium commercial sized operation. And obviously the information that you're going to want to know when you are one of those kinds of people is going to change than if you're the regular backyard grower. If you're the regular backyard grower, your catalogs are really going to focus on things like just how pretty and amazing the plants are. They're going to give you some spectacular pictures of, the best of the best. Now, more and more companies are moving away from these paper seed catalogs. Paper seed catalogs are incredibly valuable. They're wonderful things to sit on your shelf to flip through in the dark winter months, to bring joy and hope and opportunity, because of course you're wishing and hoping and dreaming about what you might be planting in your garden this coming year. And so they are wonderful bits of inspiration through the darkest parts of winter. Anybody that gets seed catalogs knows just what I'm talking about. And I'm not going to lie, they're a bit, they make you breathless, they make you lusty, they make you kind of covetous. You have inappropriate thoughts of all the tomatoes you're going to grow in the coming year. Who can really take care of 50 different kinds of tomatoes? But by the time you've looked at the pictures and the descriptions and hoped and wished and dreamed, you get a little carried away. That's pretty normal. So, yeah. I kind of, yes. They're sort of wholesome adult entertainment, these wonderful catalogs. Now, being our first ever live stream, we're trying some things out with other cameras. So I'm going to switch right now over to my seed catalog camera. Might have to straighten that up a little bit. There we go. Look at how sophisticated we are. We have our wonderful, wonderful catalog here. Now, seed catalogs are about a lot more than just trying to sell you seeds. The truth is, seed catalogs are busy trying to encourage you to think of their company as a resource. They love providing extra information. They love being something that you're going to refer back to, not just at the start of the season when you're busy wanting to buy your seeds, but later on with other information about how to take care of your plants. Lots of stories about the ways that these different companies are involved in the community, things like that. So it's always good to open up a seed catalog and take a good look at its table of contents. Now this, of course, has a huge section on vegetable seeds here. Let's zoom in a little bit. Haha, there we go. So of course there is a huge section here just on vegetable seeds. There's a very useful planting chart. I find that one of the most useful things about the West Coast Seeds catalog is they will tell you exactly when to plant seeds indoors, when to set them out, when to have them under cover, and it's beautiful charts. We'll look at those in a little bit. And then of course this is the other sections, the fruit seeds, the herbs, the flowers, the wildflowers. Wild goods would be things, live goods would be things like onion starts, things like that are living, that are different than seeds. Ornamental grasses. West Coast Seeds really focuses a lot these days on lawn solutions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the different things, all the way down to their index at the very, very bottom. Now if we go in right at the beginning, one of the neat new things that West Coast Seeds has started doing this year, if I can show you here, let's zoom back out a little bit. So for this year, for the first time, they've decided to include disease resistance information about each of the seeds that they carry. This is incredibly useful if you've had a frustrating time in trying to grow in the past and you have some wherewithal to have figured out what kind of disease problems you're finding. Some of the most common things are blossom end rot with tomatoes and things like that. There are different kinds of scabs or mildews. And this is very useful to have the information on which ones are resistant, and not just which ones are resistant, but which ones have high resistance or intermediate resistance. Because once you've grown once and you've run into problems, if you can figure out what the problem is, the seed catalog will help you through trying to find better varieties for what it is that you're doing. Some of it's management too. Some of it's in the way that you handle the particular crop. Some things you don't water from above, for example, because that'll encourage mildew. But whatever it is, here we are with this resource right at the very, very beginning, as well as some general information about disease resistance. Now, if we go right in to the catalog itself, right at the very beginning, it's going to show us all of these icons that are really, really quick ways. And a lot of seed catalogs have some version of this. They want to highlight very quickly which particular seeds you could get are certified organics. That really matters to some people. Certification doesn't always have to matter. Something can still be well grown, something can be still chemical free, but certified organic means it's gone through a particular paperwork process to prove that it is organic. And so anything with this logo on it as you go through the catalog is going to be certified organic. The AAS is a selections competition where different varieties are pitted against each other, and the absolute best ones that are the most enjoyable, the most consistent, etc., will win in the AAS. And so, again, West Coast Seeds has decided that that's an important thing to show you because some of their varieties have won that. And so then you'll see this logo next to that. Now, heirloom is the next one. Heirloom is interesting because heirloom and heritage seeds are not the same thing, right? And this is fuzzy, and lots of places have different opinions on this. But as far as it goes, when you are a museum person, like we are, and we care a lot about the history of seeds, we have to make the distinction between what is a heritage seed and what is an heirloom seed. So let's start off with heirloom seeds. Heirloom seeds are funky, interesting, notable varieties that have mostly come into prominence after World War II. These are varieties that have, like the really funky colored tomatoes that you see these days. Some of them might be very, very old, but a lot of them are the result of more modern breeding, and they are funky, they are special, they're things you probably want to hold on to because you're just so charmed by them. That's what heirloom varieties are. Heritage varieties, on the other hand, are varieties that have biographies, that have stories attached to them that can go back 100 or more years sometimes. Varieties that we know were grown in a settler's garden 150 years ago, that's a heritage variety, not an heirloom variety. It's a heritage variety. Now, there are relatively few seed catalogs that make this distinction because seed companies are interested in selling you things that you are going to be successful at, and modern breeding programs and modern kinds of seed testing do improve your chances of success. These older varieties might be more resilient. They might be better able to handle drought or other more extreme conditions, but they aren't always as pretty. They aren't always as reliable. And so there's a distinction there. What seed companies want to sell you for the most part are varieties that you are going to be successful at, or somebody that they're selling to is going to be very successful at. All right, so let's go back to our camera again. Here we are. So container, that's pretty self-explanatory. Those are varieties that tend to grow small and are suitable for growing in a container, probably on your patio, rather than actually in the dirt in the ground. That's great if you live in an apartment, if you only have a small amount of space. Even if you're growing in the ground, container varieties can still be useful because they grow smaller. West Coast Seeds loves to point out that they have been in the business a long time, and they're classics. Notice it's spelled wrong, I just realized that. But West Coast Seeds classics are ones that have been staples in their catalog for decades. And then last but not least, flowers that specifically make good cut flowers. Some look good living in your garden. Some look great even after they're cut, either dried or fresh. And so these 6 symbols that we've got here are littered throughout the catalog to help you figure out if you're interested in any of these things. These are sort of sales features. Now let me just slip over here to the live chat. I don't actually see anybody contributing to the chat. Please at least say hello so that we can see who's here and yeah, who among our viewers so far. All right, so let's go back to our seed catalog. Now, every different kind of vegetable that you might be interested in growing is going to be in your standard seed catalog. And usually, there's a lot more information here than just the name and the specific varieties that you can buy. Usually, there's some information about generally growing that particular thing, you know, the timing on when to start them, how to start them, what the growing conditions are like, when to harvest, other information about the seeds. There's a lot of useful information in each entry. So we go up a little further, there's artichokes. We go down a little bit, we've got asparagus. We go to the next page, and we've got beans. Right? Now, no matter which entry we're on, you're always going to get a very, very nice picture of that variety. Because remember, seeds are a business, and they want you to buy these beautiful things. And so they are going to give you absolutely gorgeous pictures to show you the color, to show you the shape, to give you a sense of the thing. And we love these. We love these. We go down a little farther. There we go. Certified organic. And there's the logo right there. Or right there. Now, if we actually go into the entries, you'll see the very first thing that we see in the entry for this particular variety. Let's look at the Goliath right here. Is it says OP 57 days. OP stands for open pollinated. Now, if you're the kind of person that wants to grow a garden and keep most of it for food, but collect some of the seeds back out of your garden at the end of the year so you can grow next year's crop, you want to look for varieties that say OP, because OP means open pollinated. That means that as long as there were just Goliath seeds, Goliath bean seeds there planted in that area, and they pollinated each other, you're going to get more Goliath seeds at the end. Now, the upside of open pollinated is you can save them, they're going to stay true, you're going to be able to grow more of the same thing in the future, as long as they're not cross-pollinating with anything else, as long as you're not growing anything else too close or anything else that blooms at the same time. But we've discovered that sometimes if you take 2 different varieties and you cross them, you can actually get something that's more disease resistant or something that is a little more vigorous and produces more beans for the same amount of plant. And when you have 2 different parents and you cross them, that's called an F1 hybrid. And so instead of seeing OP, you would see F1 there. Now, the downside of hybrids is if you save the seeds back at the end of the year, they're not going to grow and be the same thing necessarily because they had 2 different parents. And so they could revert more back into either one or the other, et cetera, that it's not going to be quite the same thing. So if you want to save seeds, look for OP. If you don't care, go for F1. You will sometimes find F2. That means that there's actually 4 different grandparents, which leads to 2 parents, which leads to 1 child, all different varieties or a collection of different varieties. So the F number means how many generations have been crossed together to make that one particular thing consistently. So as it happens, every bean on this page are all open pollinated. And if we cross over to the other side, they are all open pollinated as well. So let's go forward and look at something like beets. Let's go into beets here. Now right here we go, F1. So that is a hybrid. These are beets that if you save the seeds, they're not going to be the same thing. And that's fine. I mean, that's just breeding. That's a very normal part of the seed business. And you can still see it's still certified organic. These are generally very, very good beets. But the downside is, like I said, you're not going to be saving the seeds. Now, the next thing that we see here is 55 days. 55 days is telling us that it takes 55 days from when you plant that seed to when you're going to be pulling out your first beets potentially. That's in ideal conditions. It's probably going to take a little longer than that. Depends on how early you plant too, because growing days aren't all the same. A good sunny day with lots of water is a very different kind of growing day than a day that is cold and miserable. So 55 days, really, you can take all those with a grain of salt. I would just look at them to compare one variety to the other, which ones are going to mature faster. So if we go up to, say, the bull's blood up here, let me just bring this over. So this one says 35 days for greens, 60 days for roots. This one, right next to it, says 50 days right there. Okay. Now, there's lots of other useful information in here about the shape of the root. You know, these boros right here, nice round roots, incredibly dark flesh. You know, they can be harvested pretty small, for, right up to full-size roots. Strong tops and clean attachments, make very nice bunches. That's something you might want to think about if you're growing, you know, for the farmer's market or things like that. And seeds are coated to avoid clumping. All that means is that they have coated it in some clay, and it helps make them a little more individual and pelleted, so that they're not going to clump together when you plant them. And again, all of that coating doesn't mean that it isn't organic. There it is. It's still certified organic. So we keep looking through. Next thing I want to point out is that lots of different seed companies will sell different sized packets. So right here, for example, this one, the Taunus beets, which are these wonderful long cylindrical beets, which, by the way, are always my favorite for canning with. You can buy them in 5 different sizes. These are the prices. This gives you an idea of roughly the seed count in each one. So if you're growing a big market garden, you might be interested in that many. Most people aren't going to be interested in that many. Most people are just going to want to get the A variety. Now, one of the temptations when you're buying seeds, of course, is to buy too many. It is super easy to buy way more seeds than you need. And there are some things where you need to plant a lot of seeds to get the right number of plants. But, truth is, for a home garden, you're probably going to be fine buying 1 or 2 of the A-sized out of a catalog like this. And some are, even that's just way, way, way too much. Okay. Now, let's go ahead a little bit into the catalog. Let's see here. I want to go right back to my favorite resource in this entire catalog, which is, let me find the right one for us. Here we are. Welcome to, let me zoom back out, the planting guide. This is, I post this up every year. I use it to do all of my planning on when I'm starting various things. And Wesco Seeds really started off being a BC seed company, but they have really expanded to cover the entire country now. And so instead of having 1 or 2 of these charts, where they used to just be one for the Lower Mainland, and then later on 1 for the Southern Interior, Now there is almost a dozen of these, all calibrated for different climates. You live on the prairies, there'll be one for the prairies. If you live in southern Ontario, there'll be one for southern Ontario. And what this is telling me is this is telling me for each of these vegetables and each of these months what I can do. So let's zoom in a little bit here. So right away, we know that if we want to grow something like amaranth, that we direct seed, that's what the solid line is, see, direct sow. We can direct sow at the very, very end of May and into June. And that will give us our crop later on in the summer. Artichokes, we start them indoors at the end of February or through most of March. There's about a month period there. And we start them then, we grow them indoors, and then we move them out at the end of May, beginning of June. Now, obviously, this depends on the growing conditions each year, but this is a wonderful cheat sheet that takes a lot of the knowledge and wisdom that comes from, growing things year over year to figure out exactly what to plant and when. So I use this a lot to go, okay, so this third dark line right here where my finger is late March. And March is the time when you're going to start a lot of things indoors into April. But even then, by April, you're going to start to put certain kinds of cold weather greens outside. Or right here, you're actually going to be putting it outside under cover. That's what those mean. So radishes, you can put them outside in April under cover in our area. At the very bottom, it shows you what the frost-free dates are. Now, this is just for the southern interior, Kamloops, Vernon, Kelowna, and Nelson, to give you a sense. As it happens, if I put Carameus in here, our frost-free day is actually April 15th. Our last frost day is October 15th, typically, so April 15th, October 15th. So I could modify this just a little bit if I wanted to and shift things just slightly earlier. But it's good enough. It's more than good enough. I will tell you though, it is really, really hard, to wait this late to start peppers. I get so excited and I want to start them in February, and it's never a good idea because they get stunted inside. All right, so that's an incredibly useful resource for whatever part of the world you're in, whether you're in, South Central BC or the prairies or Central Ontario or the Maritimes. These catalogs are full of that useful information. Now, this one's kind of fun too, because there's a whole separate page just on, planting herbs and flowers. And not only does it include all of the same kinds of information, it also includes which ones are edible, which ones are good for cut flowers, which ones are good for containers, which ones help beneficial insects, which ones are suitable for xeriscaping, which is gardening with very little water. This is just wonderful information. And the cool thing about something like this catalog, the West Coast Seeds catalog, is that it's completely free. You can get it off their website. You can also go into most gardening centers. If they sell West Coast seeds, they are going to have a stack of these, and you are welcome to take one. This one, I actually did get in the mail, but I noticed that they were also at Garden Works in Penticton, with a note to please only take one. All right, now, when you are going through your seed catalog and you are looking at all of the different amazing things that you could be growing, the beautiful spinaches, or the different kinds of squashes, or tomatoes. Oh my goodness, you could spend hours just looking at beautiful tomatoes. You want to start thinking a little bit about what it is that you want to grow, why you want to grow it, but more importantly, what kind of space you have available. Because not all of these plants are the same. Some plants are going to be entirely suitable for containers, for example. Some you need to have a lot of space for them to spread out, or you need to provide them with space to grow up onto. Tomatoes are a great example of this, right? With tomatoes, you have what are called determinate varieties and you have indeterminate varieties. Indeterminate varieties are varieties that are going to want to keep growing up, and keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And they're going to keep making more fruit as we go along. Let's zoom in right here. So an indeterminate tomato or a vine tomato is going to require staking. You've got to know that ahead of time before you buy the seeds, that that's a commitment you're making by buying that particular kind of tomato. Now, as long as you keep picking off fruit from these and as long as you keep tending to the plant, they're going to keep producing more tomatoes right until the end of the season. That can be a wonderful thing, but it means a long season. It means tending to them continuously. One of the advantages of bush tomatoes or determinate tomatoes are that although they need some support, like a cage, they don't need trellising, and they tend to set all their fruit roughly at once. So this plant grows up to its relatively mature size. It flowers all at once. It gets pollinated all at once. The tomatoes come off mostly all at once, roughly speaking. Determinate tomatoes are often easier to work with when you're new. They're less of a commitment than indeterminate varieties. And when you go through a seed catalog, it is going to, A, take the opportunity to educate you about that, but it's also going to point out in each of the varieties what kind it is. And so then you're able to make more educated choices based on what you're looking for. So let's go in right here and let's take a look at, well, these are always going to be one of my favorite tomatoes, the green zebras. They are a delicious tomato and quite striking for how green they are, even when they're fully ripe. The stripes get almost yellowish underneath the green, so they get soft. That's how you know that they're ripe. Now, it is a vine. It is not a bush tomato. So it's an indeterminate tomato. And it gives you lots and lots of information about how big the fruits are. Talks about what they're like when they're ripe. The flavor is slightly tart. And remember, they're trying to sell you these tomatoes, so they're even going to tell you what they're good for. Now, we do want to keep in mind that this is all marketing speak. Your experience might vary a little bit, but this is good information to at least get you in the ballpark. And if you want to, some companies really do a lot to sort of show you different varieties and really split them up for you. These are slicers here, for example. Ooh, and it's a new one. There's an heirloom variety. There's our first one right there. Is it a heritage variety? No, it's an heirloom variety, but that's okay. So far we've talked a little bit about some of the different kinds of information that you're going to find in a seed catalog. That alone is going to help you a lot as you're working your way through, as you see OPs and F1s or F2s, as you see phrases like determinate and indeterminate. Now, each particular kind of vegetable also has its quirks and idiosyncrasies, and the longer you spend reading seed catalogs, the more you're going to learn about these things. So, for example, corn. Here's our corn page right here. There, look at that, perfect. So there are lots of different kinds of corns, often, ornamentals, which are often very pretty. I mean, glass gem is always sort of one of those classics. Different popcorns, of course. And then you get into, with something like a corn, you get into the genetics, I guess you would say, of it, because the different corns are different sweet levels. In terms of we're talking about sort of standard table corns, not like flower corns or dent corns or things like that. But they will break it up into, SU, SY, the enhanced, the sugary enhanced, the super sweets. There are advantages and disadvantages for each of these. Again, the sweetest ones are always going to be F1 or F2s. The open pollinated are generally going to be a little less sweet, but that's okay, because then at least you get to save the seeds and you get to keep growing it on your own. You don't have to buy seeds every year, right? So there we are as we're going through. Now I'm going to come back to me for a second here so that I can open up the other window. All right. So, hello people from all over. Good to see you from Penticton. Good to see you from Vancouver Island. What a very different world Vancouver Island is, my goodness. Now, one of the things that's also really important to know if you're going to be choosing seeds for yourself from a seed catalog is you need to know what growing zone you're in. Different growing zones is how long your growing season is, how harsh your conditions are. If you live in the Lower Mainland, you are roughly speaking a zone 7. You have, pretty mild winter. Your summer isn't too extreme. You have a nice long growing season. It is not the hottest and most productive possible, but it is still pretty decent at zone 7. As it happens, where we are here in Carameus, we are also considered a zone 7, even though we're a little harsher. Our growing season is shorter, but it is more intense. We get more sunshine. And as long as we are irrigating well, we are going to have a very good long season. And so we are considered, roughly speaking, zone 7 as well. If you go up the valley up towards Princeton, you're getting more into zone 3 or zone 4. The lower the number, the less hospitable it is, and not all varieties can handle all growing conditions. And so seed catalogs, many of them will actually tell you this, pretty directly, what's the minimum zone that this will grow in, or the zone range. This plant is suitable for zones 4 to 9, for example. Now, if you're wondering what zone you're in, you can just look that up online very easily. Just look up the phrase hardiness zone and your town, and you will come up with a map that is either just of Canada or Canada and the States with all little lines drawn in different colors to show you what zone you're in. Now, something to keep in mind is that zones are changing. As climate is changing, which it definitely is, our growing zones are changing with them. And what might have once been a 7A here is turning into a 7B or 8 sometimes now as conditions are changing over time. So beware if you're looking at a really old map from the 50s or 60s. As well, know that your area, just like the permaculture people have just mentioned in the chat, you need to know what your property's actual conditions are too. You might be in a cool, wet little hollow. You might be high up on a hill surrounded by big rocks and have a much higher temperature because of the rocks that just hold and absorb that heat. And so your local climate, your microclimate might be different than the general zone that you're in. But it's not a bad idea to start with what you think your zone is and then adjust accordingly. The other thing you can do is attend gardening events and talk to more experienced growers in your area and have them share with you their wisdom and their experience. One of the best kinds of events you can go to happen in the spring times all around the province and further afield, and they're events called Seedy Saturdays. Seedy Saturdays actually have a really cool connection back with us and this place, this heritage site, because it was our original tour guide, a woman by the name of Sharon Rempel, that back in the 80s, as she was doing research on heritage seeds, as she was collecting and preserving and connecting with other seed people, realized the need for events to gather seed people together, and she and a couple of others founded the very first Seedy Saturday down at Van Dusen Gardens in Vancouver. Since then, almost 40 years later, there are dozens of them. We're going to be hosting one in March. We also know that there's one in Penticton, there's one in Kelowna, there's one in Summerland, there's one in Kamloops, there's the biggest one in the province these days up in Enderby. All of these have seed vendors, have knowledgeable gardeners. These are great places to go to connect with like-minded seed people and gain their wisdom. Learn what it is that's going to grow well in your area. Learn what your local climate really is like without just relying on a map of the whole continent to try and figure out exactly what your growing conditions are like. Now, Cincinnati, Ohio, that's a cool town. I've been there once. Looking through here, rocks hold heat, absolutely. Rocks hold lots of heat. Also, if you spend any amount of time on an acreage, growing at a larger scale, you learn very quickly that rocks float, which blew my mind moving up from the Lower Mainland, coming to farm country and spending 10 years now farming on this piece of property, farming about an acre, is that every year more and more rocks float to the surface. They actually float in the dirt. The frost heaves them up. They're great for holding on to heat, but man, they're a pain in the butt in other ways. As far as when CD Saturday is in Penticton, it's actually on March 1st this year. I am really, really disappointed that I won't be able to be there for the first time in a number of years, because it happens to be on exactly the same day that the Enderby seed swap happens, which again is the largest in the province. There's anywhere from 50 to 100 seed vendors, growing type people, and being such a large event, the gristmill shows up, sets up a table. I wish that I could have done both. I wish that I could convince the Penticton people to change their date, but they've got to do what they've got to do because they're at the college and there's only so many free days. So please, if you're in the Penticton area, go and support them on that day. A couple of weeks later, in the middle of March, is probably when we're going to have our CD Saturday down here in Karamias. There'll be local vendors, there'll be local community groups sharing information, and we'll have a bunch of our own seeds available for sale as well, including those amazing Zucca gourds that we are absolutely obsessed with. I'd mentioned before about Sharon, our former tour guide slash, I won't call her head gardener exactly, but she was the passionate one about heritage seeds. And she was very, very interested in trying to figure out what had grown here when the Hudson's Bay Company had their garden 150 years ago, just about 300 meters away. And so she did the research and she planted a garden here to represent those exact varieties, those varieties grown in the Hudson's Bay garden back there in the 1850s. Out of that, started to find other settler diaries and information, and started to grow other gardens representing other settlers and the things that they were interested in. Out of that, she learned that there was a particular crop that was grown especially between the First and Second World War in the South Okanagan and Similkameen, these giant gourds called zuccas. And zuccas, they're 100-pound, 120-pound gourds that were used in commercial food production as filler. These gourds would be grown, sent to the canneries, and turned into jams and melon balls and all sorts of other things. Imagine zucchini, but bigger and more boring. That's what a zucca is like. And so Sharon went off in search of seeds. Now, this was in the age before the internet, and so there were a lot of letters and phone calls involved. Although there were seed catalogs, you wouldn't have found a zucca in any seed catalog. But she managed to connect with the American Gourd Association, and through their network, they discovered that one guy was still growing these things, and Sharon wrote him a letter, managed to get him to send her some seeds. 40 years later, like I showed you at the very beginning of the presentation, Baker Creek's seed catalog sells them now every year. You can buy them straight from them, although better to buy them from us because we sell them too. But out of the last 40 years, one of the coolest things that happened is that like-minded seed collectors, people who really care about this stuff, decided to get together and create organizations. In Canada, it's an organization called Seeds of Diversity. In the United States, it's called the Seed Savers Exchange. And one of the coolest things that the Seed Saver Exchange and Seeds of Diversity make are their yearbooks. And their yearbooks list all of the seed varieties, generally heritage varieties, some heirloom, some modern, mostly heritage varieties, that have been collected and preserved and are prepared to be shared. Now, as far as trying to read this, if you don't have a lot of understanding of codes and things like that, these books in particular can be very, very dense. Here, let me switch over to this. Let me zoom in here into a particular, let's find something here. So, zoom back out. Let's find a good one here. Okay, so, for example, we have right here the lima bean section. Now this has whatever information the owner of that seed has decided to share. So first, here's the person. This person's based in Iowa. They're a Seed Saver Exchange member. HF is their code, so you can then look in the back of the book and figure out how to contact them. And it mentions, how tall they are, with the shapes of the pods, high productivity when grown in 2015 in Heritage Farm, donated to Seed Saver Exchange in 81 by this bean collector. Like, you actually get a little bit of the story with all of this too. So when you're looking for really rare, obscure varieties, organizations like this can be absolutely fantastic to connect you with particular kinds of tomatoes, for example. And it just goes on and on. This particular book, which is a few years old, but it's well over 500 pages, which is, and this is the 2021 yearbook. So hard to do this in front of the upside down camera. Anyways. Now, one other resource that I would highly recommend if you're sort of an intermediate grower and you're interested in growing something really specific. Maybe there is a variety that your grandmother's always talked about, but you can't find it in a seed catalog these days. And you would have no idea where to look. You don't find it in West Coast seeds. My mom actually at one point really wanted to find seeds that came from the, was it Heinz? I think it was Heinz company. It was one of their commercial varieties that she had growing up, couldn't find it anywhere anymore. And it wasn't until I told her about a particular resource, a website, seeds.ca. That's the website for Seeds of Diversity. So seeds.ca. On there, they have something called the Canadian Seed Catalog. And what it is a comprehensive list of all of the seed varieties mentioned in every Canadian seed catalog they can get their hands on. All listed in one database. So if there is a very particular kind of tomato, say a Federley tomato, happens to be a paste tomato that I am a big fan of, you can go on there, you can click into the Canadian seed catalog, do a search for Federley, and then it will list all of the seed catalogs in Canada that have that variety. And there might be 2 or 3, there might only be 1. Now this is commercial seeds, this isn't home growers, this isn't quite like Seeds of Diversity's yearbook, exchange program, but it'll still give you a way of finding just that one particular obscure variety, which can be very, very rewarding, especially if it's something with good connections. Oh, and yes, Kelowna CD Saturday is actually on the Sunday because the Kamloops one is on the Saturday, and we're doing both of them this year. That's entirely right. Now, there are tons more things that we could talk about with seed catalogs today, but I think we've taken enough time tonight. I am really, really excited about the upcoming growing season. I hope that it's a more normal year than last year. Last year was difficult for us here in the South Okanagan Similkameen because around this time of year we went from +1, +2 to -20 something in the space of just a day. and that's what hurt all of our tree fruits here. Our peaches, our apricots, our nectarines, our cherries, we're all devastated by this. A lot of other perennial plants were pretty seriously affected by it as well. So hopefully this year is a more normal year. Hopefully by the time we get into the spring, we have a normal amount of precipitation, a normal amount of cold weather, and warm weather at all the right times so that we can have a good and healthy growing year. Now this was our first live stream, and sitting here behind the camera and at the console, already there are things that I'm going to be doing a little bit differently next week to manage myself and my cameras. But if you have any feedback, specific feedback about our live stream today, I would love it if you would email me. My email address is info @oldgristmill.ca. Please send me a note anytime. Next week, we're going to be doing a live stream on how to plan for a pollinator garden. We have other live streams happening once a week right through until February. In the middle of February, we're going to do a special one just on zuccas. And if you want to get yourself zucca seeds and try growing these monstrous behemoths, that would be a great session to come into, because I might just be giving some seeds away. So thank you so much for coming out to tonight's workshop. Check out all of our in-person workshops. We're doing a lot of cooking workshops. Sourdough is coming up this weekend. So is candy making. Next week we're making carbonated sodas from scratch. There's always something happening here at the Grist Mill and Gardens. I really appreciate your support today and always. And please, if you like today's stream, spread the word so that we can get even more people out to our next session. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening and enjoy your growing season. Bye-bye for now.